What up, Wizards? It's Dev, and boy, that Magic the Gathering calendar sure moves fast, don't it? We just got a brand new set in Standard. I want to talk about that bad boy a little bit, but there is a looming threat on the horizon that must be addressed, because just 2 weeks away, exactly as I record this video, there's a scheduled ban announcement. So who gon' get it? Well, it could be nobody. I feel like I should bring that up here at the very beginning of the video. It's kind of important. It could be nothing at all, but it could also be, and it's very important, something. So let's do what we do best as Magic players. Some might call it wild speculation, and others might call it dreaming beautiful dreams. Today, let's talk about who gonna get the hammer and who gonna keep getting jammered into our decks. That was going somewhere at first, but I lost it.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
And we're back. Now, to talk about what's getting banned, he said philosophically, one must first, of course, talk about rotation. Seems wrong, but 4 weeks after this ban announcement, 6 weeks from where I sit on this very couch, there's going to be a rotation in Standard, which, real quick, not enough people are talking about. We're kind of about to lose a bunch of sets in this thing, so maybe we should get on figuring what's going to happen with that. But Wizards may decide, as a result of that, to just tell us to sit, spin for a minute, and maybe this Standard rotation will sort things out and keep people from yelling online, which is the real goal when you think about it. But yeah, we're going to lose some stuff in this rotation, like Sunfall. I think a lot of people would say they want that banned. It's just a really annoying card. Probably doesn't have to be banned, and besides, you want to play against it ever again in Standard in just a few weeks. But apart from that, there's really good black removal like Cut Down and Go for the Throat, and that may reshape the format in a number of ways. But to be honest, there are a few really popular decks right now that don't lose that much, so I still think it's worth talking about banning at least one card that we'll bring up today. But I've actually got 4 cards that I want to talk about that I've seen people bring up when it comes to the ban conversation. We're going to talk about how much I think maybe they should be banned, and what I think their chances of being banned realistically are come June the 30th. Now, I think the way I should do this is start with the cards I think are least likely to get banned and kind of work my way up. So with that in mind, my first choice is Omniscience. I've heard some people talking about how dominant this combo deck has been recently, especially in MTGO challenges and leagues and stuff like that. And even in the arena, you do kind of see this deck a good bit. Now, when you really think about it, Omniscience is responsible for warping the format to a pretty large degree. Not all by itself, but it's definitely contributed a lot. Not only can all of these, turn 6 and 7 value town mid-range decks not exist as easily in a format with a deck like Omniscience. I mean, there's a reason that all the Unholy Annex decks and the mono white decks with Caretaker's Talent and the Golgari decks, all of those have more or less dropped off over the last couple of months. You so rarely see them. And again, that's because they exist in a format where Omniscience is just going to win on turn 4 or 5. So I don't really have to care about all that mid-range stuff you're doing over there. But that has also had the effect of making sure that most other decks in the format are really fast aggro decks that can try to beat the clock and destroy the Omniscience player before they get to turn 4 or 5 and untap. Now, red-based decks would be busted without the presence of Omniscience in the format, but it really doesn't help that there's not a whole lot of other mid-range decks that can really compete that might otherwise be able to do well against mono-red because they cannot beat this deck. So, again, I think that this is warping the format to a pretty large degree. I just don't know that it's going to be the thing that gets banned. I actually think it's much more likely if they do ban something out of Omniscience that they ban, say, Abuelo's Awakening, which does not, in fact, rotate in just a few weeks here. We'll still have Abuelo's Awakening in the format for a while, so maybe they'll take away its best reanimation option, and sure, stuff like Hope of Spira will still exist in Standard, but most of the options it'll now have for reanimating an Omniscience will back it up by a turn compared to where it is now, and maybe that'll make things more fair. But honestly, I really think that what they'll probably say, if they say anything about the Omniscience decks during the ban announcement, is that their data doesn't support the idea that this is a busted deck. I imagine they'd also say the word counterplay a couple of times, because there is decent counterplay in best of 3 against the Omniscience decks, whether it's Ghost Vacuum, etc. There's a lot of stuff that you can do to nerf the Omniscience decks, and to be honest, if you look at MTGO data over the last couple of weeks, especially since Final Fantasy has been available in Standard in the last 5 or 6 days, the Omniscience decks have actually taken a pretty severe drop off here lately, and there's even a blue-white control deck in Standard right now that does very well against the Omniscience matchup. So again, they may say that they just don't believe Omniscience poses a real threat to the environment right now, and honestly, I could get behind some of those points. Do I think that it needs to be banned? I'm going to say probably not. I'm like 20% on this one. And I think that we could probably wait a while until we decide that we have to ban it if it needs to be banned. But I think that it's probably fine as it is right now. And do I think they're going to ban it? I guess that's the other question. Well, I basically answered that one. I'm going to give this 1 star out of 5, I guess, as far as the chance of Wizards banning it. I don't know that it's going to happen, but there is a world where either it or some other card from the deck does. But steel yourself for the next card, because it's been cutting through the format for the last month or so here. Yuck, yuck, waka, waka. It's Cory Steel Cutter. Would this card get banned? Well, there's a lot of reasons you might ban it. If you want to talk about how much a card has warped the format by itself, I really think that this is public enemy number 1. And you could make the argument it's only going to get worse in the very near future because we're about to lose temporary lockdown to rotation, and that is a fantastic option against Cory Steel Cutter. And if we don't have it, that might present a problem, obviously. But honestly, I think Wizards might say something to the effect of, the format is still adjusting to Cory Steel Cutter. This is a very new card, all things considered, and Wizards doesn't usually like to ban brand new cards. And honestly, they might have a point if they said that the format is adjusting to the presence of Cory Steel Cutter, right? There's a lot of main deck 4-of duresses nowadays. A couple of Dreams of Steel and Oil. The blue decks are using stuff like Spell Pierce in the main deck, and sure, we're adjusting, but back to the concept of format warping, that is an awful lot of warping the format around one card. Having to play a bunch of sideboard cards in your main deck instead of cards you actually want to play in the main deck is often exactly the reason that a card gets banned. I mean, the format can adjust, but there becomes a point where the format has to adjust too much, bend too much around one card's will, and you could definitely successfully, I think, make the argument that Cory Steel Cutter is doing just that to the format. But we've reached the question, do I think they should ban this card? And not to cop out, I'm only going to do this with this one card in the video, but it's honest. I'm still not sure. I might be able to be tipped in one direction or another, but what both I and Wizards may end up saying here is that we're going to ban a different red card and see kind of how that goes for a second. But on that note, do I think Wizards is going to ban it? What's the chances of this card getting banned? We'll go like 1.5 stars on this. Again, I think they'll say that it's too new, format's still adjusting, we're going to ban something else instead, see how that goes, keep an eye on it. I think there's going to be a lot of excuses for why they don't ban this card, and like I said, I don't know that I don't or do buy those excuses. I am just not sure whether or not this one deserves a ban yet, but if things are still looking the same way they look now a few months from now, then yeah, maybe we can revisit the idea. But my number 2, I guess, if this is a list, has this been a list the entire time? It's going to be Up the Beanstalk. Pretty obviously. I think my number 1, if we're going to call it that, is also fairly obvious. But I think the question of whether or not we should ban Up the Beanstalk is a lot more complicated than it might have been a couple of months ago, when multiple people were releasing content. Like most famously, Brian Kibler made a pretty good argument for banning the card a couple of months ago. And I think, again, not bad points to be made on this one. It may not necessarily dominate MTGO League and challenge results or anything like that, but it has basically won the last couple of Pro Tours, which means something, right? Didn't it win Worlds too? Am I wrong? Just a pretty powerful Magic card, especially in the hands of a skilled pilot, but it can be a first day drive-in and you can play this card pretty easily. I mean, aside from Omniscience, this is basically the only other mid-range thing you can do in the format. You know, and there's a bunch of decks that leverage it, not just the Xur domain decks. But on that note, Xur, domain as a concept, and Leyline Binding specifically, are all rotating out here in just a couple of months. And Leyline Binding plus Xur might be the absolute best thing you can actually do in Up the Beans decks, but that said, just because Xur is so good doesn't mean that Up the Beanstalk is bad once those cards are out of Standard. Beans is still a ridiculous Magic card that's had to be banned in Modern already. Even though it's a lot more breakable in Modern, it's still pretty easy to break in Standard. There's a lot of stuff you can cast for less than 5 that still thinks it's a 5-mana thing, so you draw a lot of cards off of this, and by the time you've, destroyed it, they've drawn at least a 1 card when it came into play, so it replaced itself. It's already kind of putting you down on cards if you get lost it or something, but if they've drawn even 1 other card off of it, that's kind of too much card advantage, and of course, they'll probably just draw into another one with Up the Beanstalk. So if you blow away one of them, they'll just have another one waiting in the wings. Up the Beanstalk is maybe the actual best card advantage engine, not just in Standard, but kind of even beyond. So I wasn't surprised when this card got banned in Modern. And even though, again, It's a lot more easy to leverage broken plays in Modern with a card like this. It is still very easy to do it in Standard, and I think that Wizards might fear that even after rotation, Standard is just a bunch of up the beanstalk decks and low to the ground aggro decks, and especially if you ban something from aggro to try to kneecap them a little bit, which, spoiler alert, I think you probably should do. That makes the Beans decks even more powerful at that point. So maybe you try to kneecap mid-range at the same time you kneecap aggro, and we just get a brand new fresh format until rotation. But I guess you run into the problem that if you ban both the best mid-range card draw engine and the best card in aggro, the Omniscience decks run wild. So this might actually support the argument that you ban nothing, because Beans decks are good, the ones with Zur and the Overlords. The Omniscience decks are a good like turn 4 or 5 combo deck. The aggro decks are a really good version of an aggro deck, and aggro has the right to exist in any standard environment. So right now they might say we have a decent little paper, rock, scissors meta going, and we only need 3-4 decks in standard. So they could come to that conclusion, and I want to make sure everyone knows that, but I still think that there is a greater chance that they ban Beans than any other card we've talked about today. Do I think this card needs to be banned? No. Honestly, probably not, especially with the impending rotation. We'll see how the loss of especially Leyline Binding, but even Zur hurts a card like this. We'll see what people do with it. You know, there's already a Golgari Graveyard deck with Huskburster Swarm and all these other huge dudes that are effectively like 1 mana apiece, and they all trigger Beans. So that deck is good, but is it good enough to want to ban a card like this after rotation? Probably not. So I don't necessarily think it'll be banned, but I do think Wizards will take it upon themselves to ban this card more so than the other cards we've already talked about. So I will actually give this one a 2.5 stars, a 50% chance effectively of being banned in just a couple of weeks. But the number 1 card, again, I kind of snuck a list concept into this video, is pretty obvious by now. It's Monstrous Rage. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cut to the chase on this one. Do I think it needs to be banned? Yes, I do. I'll save whether I think they'll ban it for a little bit later here, but ultimately, yeah, I think if there's one card in Standard that probably needs to eat a ban because it doesn't rotate and Standard is already warped way too much around it and it alone, it's actually Monstrous Rage. Now, the problem with this card, first of all, is that nothing rotates from its deck. Like, basically, the only thing that really rotates is Monastery Swiftspear, and if you look over the last couple of weeks, and even beyond just that, a lot of these decks are starting to cut Monastery Swiftspear either entirely or down to 2 copies. They don't even need Swifty anymore, so them losing it won't really be a giant hit. And I think between Cory Steelcutter and just regular old mono red aggro, or like the Gruul variants and stuff right now, you do need to cut something to kind of calm mono red down a little bit because it is so freakishly good right now. And that card probably needs to be Monstrous Rage. This is the most egregious offender that doesn't rotate, and the one that's kind of had the longest time to establish a track record in Standard already. I think you need to get rid of this. It just invalidates blocking against the aggro deck, which is, again, probably its worst sin, but that said, it also synergizes with way too much for way too little of a cost. You know, Hardfire Hero tramples over for a couple and then casts Lava Axe on you on its way out. That's like 7 or 8 damage for just 2 total mana on 2 cards. Emberheart Challenger, like that. Manifold Mouse is another good example, actually. You know, Manifold Mouse and this is ridiculous synergy that basically builds your own Ember Cleave. You know, trample and or trample and double strike is a ridiculous combination on nearly any creature of any size. So with that said, that's a 3 mana interaction, Manifold Mouse and Monstrous Rage. So too much ridiculous, like in many cases game winning synergies for way too little investment and way too few cards. I mean, if the card had just been like +3/+0 in trample and that was it, that would be a pretty good Magic card just on its own. But the fact that it puts a roll token on the guy, so the +1/+1 sticks around forever. Importantly, the trample sticks around forever, which is really, really annoying. They just push this card all the way to the moon, and it might be time to bring it back down to earth, man. There's a couple of cards in the mono red deck, more than a couple really, that already have like fixed alchemy versions, like Hardfire Hero and Monstrous Rage. They they know they have to fix these cards for them to be like truly decent, like at the right power level in standard, not completely broken. And with that in mind, I think that they know they should probably ban one of these cards from mono red. And if it's going to be anything, I would imagine it will be Monstrous Rage. I am going to give this card 4 out of 5 stars in terms of its chances of getting banned. I think if they ban anything at all from standard, it'll be Rage. Now, I'll acknowledge that could start like a cascading kind of effect, a dovetail where, if we ban Monstrous Rage, now we have to ban Up the Beanstock. And if we ban Up the Beanstock, we got to ban Omniscience or Boiler's Awakening. We got to keep all these decks in check so they don't become the new, mono red deck. That said, I don't think they have to go about doing all that. I think they might just be able to kick Monstrous Rage out of the format and then say something to the effect of, we'll wait on standard rotation to see how things shake out from there. Because you could really go all day with that. Well, if you ban this, you got to ban that, and you got to ban that. Like if you ban something from Omniscience and Up the Beanstalk and you ban Monstrous Rage, well now, does the blue-black deck with the Kaitos and stuff take over? What do you ban Deep Cavern Bat? It's like the conversation can continue forever if you get into that hole. Now, one last thing, while we're kind of technically still on Monstrous Rage here, I think that there is an outside chance that they do ban something that isn't Monstrous Rage or Cory Steelcutter. You gotta remember that Wizards is weird sometimes. Sometimes they ban weird stuff. What is it, Rampaging Ferocidon or whatever it's called got banned, and everyone's like, why? Exactly. So sometimes they just come out of nowhere and ban, Reflector Mage, and you're like, how come? Who knows, right? So all I'm going to say is that there is a chance that they end up banning, Screaming Nemesis or Emberheart Challenger or Manifold Mouse instead of Monstrous Rage, but I think those chances are pretty slim. That said, Screaming Nemesis, I don't think it needs a ban, don't get me wrong, but there's something calling out to me about that card that makes me think Wizards has that one like on the chopping block. But again, that's only because Wizards is weird and you can't actually predict what they're going to do. But anyway, that's all I've got for this one. Just let me know if there's any other cards you think maybe need to be banned. I don't think so. But just if you have impassioned arguments, I'd like to hear them. I can be swayed, especially on Cory Steelcutter, right? I've already said I'm on the fence about that one. So if you have like a real argument for banning or keeping it in the format, again, I'll read your comments. Kind of want to know what you guys feel about that one in specific, but all of these, obviously. Do you think Omniscience or Boiler's Awakening needs to eat a ban? That's another one I'm kind of interested in. And, of course, Beans and Monstrous Rage. So I guess I'm interested in all of these. I want to know if I'm way off base in how much I think the community dislikes Monstrous Rage. Am I way off base in how much I think Wizards might ban Up the Beanstalk? Is that card entirely safe? And you think Wizards think so too? I'm kind of interested in this one, and I'm pretty sure this one's going to get a boatload of comments. So just let me know. Don't be afraid to let me know down there. But either way, we'll meet back here in a couple of weeks and we'll discuss what actually happened on ban day. But in between here and there, the meantime, the between time, there's plenty of other things to talk about. Final Fantasy Standard and the upcoming rotation for that matter. That's a whole thing for a different video. I can do a whole video on that, and as a matter of fact, I'll probably do 2 or 3. So make sure you're subbed to the sandwich if you want that content. Like this video, it's the button shaped like a thumb, and of course, you can check out that Patreon if you feel like it. It's just $1 a month, and it really does help support the content in like a massive way. I can continue doing this because of Patreon folks. So big thanks to y'all, and if you consider becoming one, big thanks to you. But anyway, just glad that you guys are still here. Watch time's great. But anyway, just let me know how you felt about all this stuff, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.